Hi everybody, welcome to the New Look Indycar. My name is Gordon Ross. It's Wednesday evening, 18th of July 2018. In the news, Westminster is closing for the summer recess amid scenes of utter chaos as the Tories under Theresa May managed to scrape through the main business of the Brexit deal with just a few votes to spare. In the meantime, while the chaos is reigning supreme in Westminster, the troubles in Northern Ireland appear to be about to reignite as a part of the ensuing chaotic nature of Brexit and what it's doing to the Irish border and how it is stoking the desires of the Irish people generally to reunite the whole of the island and to stop this nonsense of borders between North and South once and for all. So there is a lot going on, very chaotic scenes happening in the UK at the moment. On the other side of the Atlantic, Donald Trump flew home from his visit to see the Russian president to what you could only say is a lynch mob waiting for him when he got back. I was going to say Bush, but Trump himself has done something rather bizarre, even by his own strange standards. He went over there and managed to provoke peace with the Russians, completely unexpectedly and apparently entirely against the general sort of mission statement that the Americans were wanting him to promote, which was the Russians are bad, we don't like them, and they're always up to no good, and we should not trust them. Instead of which, Trump went on the charm offensive, congratulating Putin on the way he was running the place and the way he ran the football, and everything seemed to be very chummy, and Trump seemed to come away from this having it was almost as if he'd done a trade deal with the Russians while he was there. Unusually, Putin was the only person that Trump didn't overtly criticise before visiting him. You'll notice it was all the Europeans and the British heads of state who were slagged off by Trump before he got there. Trump, don't know what he's really about, but he has this odd habit of sometimes doing well or doing good things accidentally, just as a byproduct of his usual chaotic whim of iron kind of arrangements where he just thinks something up one day that he's going to say and it pours out of his mouth before any of his advisors have had a chance to vet the script or even to stop him from saying things. So now he's having to go and say that he meant to say wouldn't instead of would, when if you watch the actual delivery of his speech and his address, he clearly meant to say would. And so this changes the whole complexion of the interplay between Putin and Trump. Putin and Trump seem to get on okay. I think, to be fair to Putin, he was a little bit perplexed by Trump's whole demeanour. And although he gave him every courtesy and agreed with him and was very friendly and warm towards him, I could see when Putin shook hands with Trump that he didn't really want to get close to this man. I think he realised he's just what a loose cannon Trump really is. It's a miracle that his tenure as president has lasted this long. He causes chaos wherever he goes. He caused chaos in the UK, caused chaos at NATO, caused chaos in the EU, and then he causes yet more chaos by being nice to the Russians. He's been nasty to all of his allies and really friendly to the supposed enemy. I feel like the whole world has fallen down a rabbit hole in the last few months with Donald Trump at the helm and with the British Tories trying to rip Britain out of the EU. It was Fintan O'Toole in the Irish Times, I think, summed up what's happening in Britain extremely well when he said he was comparing the original white paper in 1972, which proposed joining the then European Common Market, with the current Brexit white paper. And what he said, I think, was interesting. He pointed out there's something missing from the Brexit paper, which was in the original paper of joining the EU, but isn't in this one. And that was a look at Britain's place in the world as it is at the moment, and a good look at what's changed in the world. How is Britain going to be positioned after Brexit? Where will it be? Who will its allies be? Why is it pulling out of Europe? What is their position going to be afterwards? Now, when we were asked back in 1973 to vote to join the EEC, that statement was made quite clear. Britain was a fading state. It was a rundown colonial power, past colonial power, which was in decline. And the British state accepted that. And I thought, well, if we're in decline, we're going to end up as a small, isolated country off the coast of Europe. It would be better, since the major power brokers at that time would have been America and the Soviet Union, and possibly China, for Britain to ally itself with its nearest neighbours, to form its own power bloc, to form its own trading bloc, and to be part of something bigger where it was protected and there was some force of numbers. And that was why, really why we joined the EEC in the first place, not just to trade, but to be part of this bigger bloc, so that we would have a bit more protection and a little bit more power in the world, considering the dangers of nuclear war, for one thing, between, at that time, the Soviet Union and the United States, both of whom had, at the time, over 5,000 nuclear warheads apiece. And the whole world could have been obliterated within about half an hour with that kind of arsenal. So that was how things looked when we went into the EU. But why are we coming out of the EU when there is chaos in the rest of the globe? The global economy, the capitalist free market economy, and the globalization experiment has literally hit the wall this year. There is no more growth to be had in the world. It's not possible for the capitalist growth model to work anymore, because to do that would mean stripping the earth of all of its remaining resources in one go and using them all up in one gigantic, huge splurge where everybody's employed and everybody's making money, but at the end of it, there would be nothing left. The whole world would be so polluted and so empty of resources that there would be nothing left. All that would happen is that the hyper-wealthy would probably find some safe havens to hide in, where the rest of us all starved and fought over whatever resources were left, like some kind of Mad Max movie. So the world is a chaotic place at the moment, and the one thing you really don't want to do as a small country when the world is a chaotic place is not know what your place is in it. And at the moment, the United Kingdom has not got a Scooby what its place in the world is going to be after Brexit. And we all know up in Scotland that it's most likely that the UK will exit without a deal, in which case we're on our lonesome. We're on our Jack Jones. We will be like a ship adrift in the Atlantic Ocean with nobody to rescue us. What will happen after Brexit? Well, if the worst came to the worst, we will still be trading with Europe, but at a much reduced level. Goods coming in will be fantastically expensive because we'll be paying up to 30-40% tariffs on goods coming from the EU. So things are going to be 30 or 40% more expensive. Things going from us to the European Union will be, likewise, expensive, which in the case of a country like Scotland, which produces a lot of luxury goods, for example, let's take things like, well, whiskey's the obvious one, isn't it? But then you've got food. So you've got things like langoustines, shellfish, salmon, prime beef, and also you've got the craft beers, you've got gin, you've got all kinds of things. And all of these are premium, high-priced products, luxury items that are bought in other parts of Europe, in Russia, the Far East, because of their luxury value. Will they be hit badly by doubling in price or going up by 30% when we export them? Well, of course they will, because there's now competition for things like whiskey from places like Japan, who make excellent whiskey of their own. It's not Scotch whiskey, it's Japanese whiskey, but it's bloody good stuff. Luxury items like that, we will lose out. We'll be on our own, we'll be trying to find new trading partners, and the only one that is really going to be left, well, to Britain anyway, after Brexit, when we come out without any friends and without any deal, is going to be America. And America is being run by a lunatic. who has no idea of the damage he's doing, has no idea what the unintended consequences of him mouthing off at various meetings will be. And because of that, Britain would be tied to a country which is basically being led on the whims of a madman, an egotist who really doesn't know what being a president is about. He just thinks he's being a businessman. He's not being a businessman. He's supposed to be a leader, and he is supposed to lead. He's supposed to be diplomatic. He's supposed to strike the right kind of tone when he's visiting foreign dignitaries, respect, all the rest of it. He's not supposed to go wading in, slagging them off, and then cuddling up to them the next minute and confusing the hell out of everybody. The man is as consistent as a loose fart in outer space. He has absolutely no consistency as a human being at all. You never know what you're going to get with Trump. He is like the proverbial box of chocolates in Forrest Gump. You don't know what he's going to be like from one moment to the next. And his henchmen in Washington are now having to get him to say sorry for the things that he said when he was in Russia. Anyway, which brings me back to the point. And the point is this: Scotland is a small country, and we know what our place in the world is. And our place in the world is as a very wealthy small country which does a lot of trade with both Europe, the Far East, and America. And there's no reason why it shouldn't continue to do that. But Scotland does need a hand, because independent, after Brexit, we've got a lot of building work to do to build our economy up, to strengthen it, to build our currency up. There's a lot of work to be done, and we need good partners to help with that. We need good faith from Europe to do that. So we know that our place is somewhere in connection with Europe. I don't necessarily mean we stay as a full EU member. We might go into the European Free Trade Association, which would be fine. There wouldn't be any problem with that. We could keep trading. We could stay in a lot of the different projects that we are already in with Europe. But one of the benefits that Scotland gets from being in Europe is funding. Small countries in remote rural parts of the outer fringes of Europe get proportionately more funds than those wealthy nations at the centre of it. So there's always a benefit to Scotland in staying in something like the EU, or at least staying in a position where it can trade freely. One final thing tonight, it may have caught your attention as well. Do you remember there was a spaceport being announced day before yesterday? And the spaceport was to be built in Sutherland, and the money was coming from Lockheed Martin and Highlands Enterprise and the British Space Agency. Well, now today, I thought I was hearing things that there's to be another space launch centre on Unst in Shetland. It's Shetland. And this has been coming for a long time. But interestingly, the one in Shetland is a private venture. It's not being backed by the government. It's not been part of the bidding process for the British spaceport. And yet, again, Lockheed has stepped in to help them out. Lockheed has stepped in with money to help this new spaceport in Shetland. Nothing to do with the British government. Now, this is a very interesting development. It seems to me, I don't know if you've caught on to this, but Lockheed is hedging its bets. On the one hand, it's thrown its lot in with the UK Space Agency in this bizarre plan to convert an area of natural beauty in Sutherland into a launch pad. And on the other hand, a private venture being undertaken by local people, local investors in Shetland, to build precisely the same kind of facility on Shetland. Now, why would Lockheed invest in both of them unless they were covering all the bases? Because think about it this way: if Scotland leaves the UK and it wants to continue with any kind of space program, which I'm sure we would want to do, then the base that's being planned to be built at Sutherland won't happen. And that means Lockheed still needs to find a launch site in Scotland to put their smaller rockets into polar orbits. And that would be where Shetland would come in. And there are other places, incidentally, in the Western Isles and on the west coast of Scotland, which are good for space tourism. Now, that's not the same thing. Remember, vertical launch rockets are primarily for launching satellites into orbits over the poles. But for manned spaceflight, we need a runway, a long one, and we need airport-type facilities. We need engineering facilities on site for turning the aerospace planes around and flying them back up again. So all of those things really come down to places like Machrihanish and Prestwick. So things are getting interesting, but I think it's very telling that Lockheed Martin are investing in the little Scottish venture as well as the so-called big British one in Sutherland. It shows you that Lockheed are playing both ends to the middle in this game of where are they going to launch their polar orbiting satellites. So interesting times we live in. I'm sorry this particular programme is so late, but the new car I'm in today has had to be christened with a couple of lessons earlier on. So I'm now in the new Indycar, completely different colour, totally different car, totally different graphics, and it's actually lovely. It's very nice to drive. I'm very happy in it. It's perhaps not quite as bright inside, but I will continue with Indycar regardless of what colour the car is, and I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully tomorrow. Anyway, bye for now. Have a good evening.